Hello. Hope you're well. Okay, so we're going to do a pencil drawing today. We're going to draw a skull, and I'm going to show you how to do a little bit of shading and blending and things like that. You might not necessarily have all of this. So I've got two pencils today. I've got an HB pencil and a 2B pencil. 2B slightly darker and softer. And I'm also going to use this. It's called a tortillon, or a pencil, or sorry, a paper stump. And it's a little bit like a pencil, but it's just made out of paper, and we're going to use it to blend. You can use your finger to blend as well. So if you've not got something like this, you can use, like I say, your finger and whatnot. So I'll show you how to do that as well. And I've also got my rubber or my eraser. It doesn't matter if it's not a putty eraser or a kneaded eraser like this one. But we're going to get into it. So to start the initial sketch, I'm going to use my HB pencil, and I'm going to draw a rough, almost a circle, sort of a flat circle, slightly oval. And then to the side, each side, I'm going to do two smaller circles. And then I'm just mapping out where things are going to go. So the shape of the skull is it's a semicircular, almost a ball on the top. And then that makes way down in towards these sort of cheekbones, they look like, these edges here, which then comes down into the upper jaw, where your top teeth sit. Now, coming down from these cheekbones, they sit inside. This is sort of the jaw, the side of the mouth, and down into a slightly pointed chin. That's the basic shape of our skull. Now, in the centre, sitting just slightly above those cheekbones, we have a nose cavity. So we're going to draw almost a tear shape for that for now. And then either side of that, we have the eye sockets. Now, the eye sockets are not round. They're a almost rectangular type shape. We can modify those as we go along. So I'm just loosely sketching this out with my HB pencil. I'm not pressing on too hard because there will be things that I need to rub out. Let's get these roughly the same size. I can see that this one on the right hand side is slightly bigger. Okay, so let's add a little bit more detail in now to this jawline, and we'll get some teeth in there. Okay. So the teeth are going to be sort of clenched together. Going to make this slightly jagged line across the top where each of the teeth are going to sit in the jaw itself, and then similar along the bottom. Okay, so the two front teeth are the biggest really. and then the teeth coming out to the side get slightly smaller as we come up into the back, into the molars. And then the same on the other side. And then we're just going to fill out a similar pattern of teeth on the bottom jaw. We're not getting bogged down with too much detail just yet, we're just getting these initial sketches in. Okay, so the side of the skull here, we've got, the skull's basically made up of separate bones. They fuse together in your first few months, first 5 or 6 months I think it is, but babies tend to have a soft spot, and that's where the bones are not quite joined. So the skull is made up of separate bones, and we can just see some of those here, just making up our skull. So the edges aren't exactly round on that side there, it's not a football that we're drawing, so make sure we just get a little bit of detail in there. And so this top jaw now comes around there. So this is actually a hole in here. We're seeing straight through that. That's so this cheekbone here is not quite round. I'm going to make this eye socket slightly bigger, just to alter the shape of it slightly. Just got some details coming up above the nose cavity, and then just a slight hint of where it's almost where your eyebrows would sit, but there's a jutting out of bone above the eyes, which actually just protects the eyes. If you feel above your eyes, you've got some bone there that slightly sticks out. It's not completely flat, and we've just got a bone within the nose cavity there. Okay, so we've got, I'm just mapping out some of these details that we're going to put in there, and a hint of some, they look like cracks and things like that, but again they're just going to be where the bones have joined together as you grow. Okay, right then, so I'm going to take my 2B pencil now, which is slightly darker, and I'm going to be using the paper stump as well. So we're going to start in the darkest areas. So the darkest areas are going to be the nose cavity and the eyes. So I'm just going to lightly shade from the darkest area, which is going to be up in here. Now, the key to shading and making things look realistic is to understand where the light will struggle to hit and where the light actually hits. So let's say that the light was coming from this top left corner here. This side here is going to be darker. Within here is going to be one of your darkest areas, inside there as well. So let me show you what this tortillon does, or this paper stump. So I can just now start to blend some of that graphite down. You can do the same thing with your finger, you can get the same kind of effect, but ultimately what we want is we want this whole drawing to be covered with pencil. We don't want to leave anything white. Even though you think a skull is white, if you were to take a photograph of a skull and turn it into a black and white picture, it's not just going to be white, it's going to be a mixture of blacks, greys, some areas which are slightly lighter. So we're going to do a similar thing on this side now. We've not finished that by any means. So I'm just going to get some of this, we call it value. Each of these pencils gives you a different value. And the more you layer it, the more you blend it, the darker you can make things appear. So I'm just getting an initial layer in there, and I can use this pencil stump. You can get these pencil stumps off of Amazon or from WH Smith's, anywhere like that. They're very cheap. They're just paper. They're just rolled up paper. You could maybe even make one quite simply. Okay, so let's start getting a little bit of value now in the nose itself, in this nose area. And then we're just going to use the paper stump to just shade that out slightly. So the next darkest area is going to be this side here, because as the bone of this head comes down and bends around to the left, the light is going to be struggling to get into this section here. So this is going to be the darkest area. So we're just going to put a little bit of value in there. And then I'm going to use my paper stump to drag some of it out. And we get we call it a gradation. We get a smooth transition from dark into light. And then if I want to go back in and darken areas up, I can. And I've got a whole range of pencils. I've got right up to a 9B, so I could go much darker in certain areas if I wanted to. Okay, so underneath this eye socket here, or around the edge of this eye socket, we've got this dark area. Just blending that out. We'll always work from the darkest part to the light. Now if I just bring a little bit, I'm going to use my HB here, it's a slightly harder pencil. If I just bring a little bit of value to the edge of this eye socket, just make that slightly darker in there. What it then does is it highlights this edge of the bone here that's sticking out further. So this area here, because we've left that lighter, our eye interprets that as being something that's closer towards us, so it makes it look as though it's slightly sticking out towards us. I'm going to use my HB now. I'm just going to try and get a similar effect around the edge of this nose now, because this nose has got, or it's sticking out further than the surrounding area of the skull here. So we're just going to get this edge in here, similar to this one what we had there. And then I'm just going to drag some of that out. Now remember, the objective once this drawing's complete is we're going to have pencil over the entire thing. We're not going to leave any of it white. So I'm going to make that a little darker with my 2B around the edge. And this is what we would call shading. Adding dark areas, light areas and mid-tone areas. So I can work out way across the skull now, just using the paper stump. And then I can add details and cracks in there once I've got the desired coverage. So I'm going to make these much darker now, these eye sockets. Certainly at this top area here. And then right at the very, very back of the eye socket, even though it's all fairly dark, there is going to be a darker area because there's actually a hole where your optic nerve goes through and in towards the brain. So even within this dark area, we've got an even darker zone right at the back. So we need to make sure that we leave that. And again, it just adds a little bit of realism to your drawing. I can keep layering that with my 2B pencil if I wish. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a little bit of value out, so it looks as though we've got some light hitting this edge there and some around there. And that's why these types of erasers are so useful, because I can change the shape of it to get into the small areas, the little nooks and the crannies. So I'm going to bring out some value in on that side. Okay, so sitting underneath this jawbone, this is going to be nice and dark under there because it's being shaded and shadowed by this top area. So I'm going to bring some of this HB down into it, and then I'll use some of my 2B to give that a much darker look to it, so that it looks as though it's sitting behind the jawbone there, or the cheekbone, sorry, this is the jawbone. And then I'm just going to bring the value down. These are very handy, these paper stumps. Most artists will use them. We've got a slightly darker zone way in the back there, which I'll just bring in. So now I'm going to start getting some more of this HB across the entire side of the skull here. And once we've got the value and the graphite covering most of the drawing, working from the darkest areas first, we can then start to add details. We can take away highlighted areas. So we have a darker area across there. And I'm just lightly feathering the paper stump, pressing hard where I want it dark, and then loosening the stroke, making it slightly softer where I want it to be lighter. Adding a few more details within the eye socket there. There's a few cracks and darker areas and slightly lighter areas. And what I'm going to use just to bring some across here is I'm going to use a tissue paper, so just a regular tissue paper, and I'm just going to bring some of this excess value all the way across, because this right hand side, I want this to stay nice and light. I don't want it to be as dark as this left hand side. So I'm just going to bring in with this tissue paper just some value onto this side, and then I can really start to darken up the darkest edge here. We can also then start to take some highlights out. So I'm going to use the 2B pencil. Keep checking where the darkest points are. They always need to remain dark. The areas that are shaded by another part of the skull. Just keep working my paper stump, taking a little bit of lighter areas out there. So this nose now needs to be much darker in places to give it the definition and to make it look as though it is a hole which is going into the back of the skull. Make that slightly wider. Let's add some darkness now into this eye socket on the right. Making sure that I understand where the darkest parts are going to be, and that's right up in the corner. The corners of things are always the darkest because that's where the light struggles to reach. So add a little bit more pencil in this corner. And again, we've got that darker zone way in the back, so we're going to make that the darkest area because that's a hole within the hole. That we need to make sure that we have. So even though this side is the lighter side, there are still going to be darker parts within that. So this area here where the bones are connected is going to be slightly darker. And we're going to have slight darkness on this top jaw. We've got some details and things in there, bone structures. That we need to get in. And now I've been using this paper stump for a while. It's got excess graphite on it, so I can actually use it to subtly change shapes of things and add details in there without necessarily having to use the pencil itself. So it's really handy. And I can just get a little bit of texture and things in there. So this underneath this part of the jaw, again, similar to the other side, is going to be nice and dark. And it fades down and around. Let's take some slight highlighted areas out on this side here, just to give it a look that we've got some light hitting it. The areas that are sticking the furthest out will receive the most light. And I can smooth that out. If I've got a few streaks in there, I can smooth that out with the tissue. Just take some slight highlights out on the teeth. Working on the right hand side of the teeth mainly because the light's coming from this side. So these teeth up in the back are going to be the darkest areas. So then getting some of these final details in now, I'm just going to press a little bit harder and get a lovely contrast in there. So really working some of those dark zones. And now I've pretty much got the drawing planned out and it's all in the right places and whatnot. I can press on a little bit harder, but I've got to be careful because if I make a mistake now, I'm not going to be able to erase this because I'm pressing on quite hard. So these final details towards the end, you have to be certain that we're happy with everything. Getting some of those teeth in. Remember, the teeth towards the back are going to be the darkest. Just using my pencil stump to bring out a few details here and there, just to give this skin a bit of a skin, there's no skin on this, to give this bone a bit of a texture. And I can carry on doing this as much as I like. I can spend a lot of time with the details, and it's kind of the best part of the drawing. I think it's where you really start to bring it to life. But I think you've got the general idea. So it'd be fantastic to see some of you have a go at this. It's a little bit more challenging. I've just used the 2 pencils. I might have used a few more, working with some of the H pencils, which are a little bit lighter. But I'm quite happy with how this is looking. You know, I would, if I was really wanting to make this look super realistic, I'd spend another hour or so on it. But for the purpose of showing you guys some basics of shading, how light affects objects and things like that, I think I'm quite happy with it. Just a little bit of more detailing on those teeth. And then one thing that I do like to do just at the end is just to tidy up the edges a little bit, because you'll be surprised, particularly if you're using your finger to smudge and blend, you'll be surprised how much of the pencil actually comes out into the paper around your drawing. So just tidy that up at the end. Let me just bring a few. And there we go. So that's a school tutorial. I hope you enjoy that and give it a go. I'd like to see some of your attempts at that. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.